There are moments in MotoGP when the absence of one rider weighs more than the presence of everyone else. Francesco Bagnaia knows this better than anyone. He has felt it not as nostalgia, but as imbalance, like a circuit losing one of its apexes, like throttle with no resistance. Since Marc Márquez stepped away, the air inside Ducati's garage has changed density. The telemetry still blinks, the tires still scream, the stopwatch still counts, but the rhythm feels incomplete, the dialogue interrupted. Bagnaia doesn't say it out of sentimentality. He says it because his craft depends on that friction. Every rider needs a mirror sharp enough to cut him open, and Marc was that mirror. Without him, Pecco's data makes sense, but his soul doesn't. The GP25 responds, but not the same way. The feedback loop between man and machine becomes quieter, like an orchestra missing its percussion. Engineers see numbers, but Bagnaia feels voids. Those microseconds where instinct used to answer instinct, where one genius provoked another into transcendence. His internal monologue has turned technical. Without Marc's pressure, my reference disappears. My telemetry is perfect but lifeless. In his world, perfection without resistance is a malfunction. When he closes the visor now, he doesn't only hear his own desmosedici. He hears the ghost frequency of the other engine that used to chase him through every braking zone. He studies corner entry loads, grip coefficients, torque dispersion maps. But what he truly seeks is that unseen gravitational pull that Marquez generated, the feel that distorted every race into something mythic. He misses the unpredictability that forced him to evolve, the chaos that refined his precision. It's not admiration, it's dependence born of rivalry. For Bagnaia, Marc's absence isn't relief, it's silence. And silence on a MotoGP bike at 350 kilometers per hour is the most terrifying sound of all. It was from that silence, that aching void where Marquez's roar once lived, that Bagnaia's confession was born, a moment when truth replaced noise and the world finally heard the heartbeat beneath the helmet. Francesco Bagnaia sat before the microphones in Melbourne with the expression of a man who had just unwrapped his own silence. The room smelled of fuel and fatigue, yet his voice carried something purer than both. People think I'm talking about excuses, but no, it's the truth. It's difficult without Marc. For a second, even the journalist forgot to type. He looked down at his hands, fingers still trembling from the throttle's ghost, and the words escaped like air from a valve he could no longer seal. What if my best self only exists when he's on the other side of the garage? The thought, quick and cruel, sliced through him. Around him, screens flickered with slow-motion images of Marquez leaning into turn 3, shoulder grazing asphalt like a comet touching water. Bagnaia knew every telemetry pulse of that corner. He also knew that Marquez's braking phase lasted 0.12 seconds longer, a microscopic eternity that changed everything. The confession wasn't strategy. It was surrender to truth. Reporters leaned closer as if his honesty emitted heat. He spoke again, calmer now, about the invisible gravity Marc created within Ducati, pulling everyone toward a higher orbit. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. We are planets, and he is the star that burns us but gives us light. Outside, the wind off Phillip Island howled through the paddock canopies, a reminder that nature too respects no champion for long. Inside, Pecco's tone shifted from resignation to revelation, the way an engine note deepens when fuel meets perfect compression. He admitted he'd studied Marc's corner data frame by frame, searching for meaning in decimals that mocked him with precision. The audience felt the tremor between admiration and despair, that fragile border where rivals become mirrors. For a heartbeat, he seemed ready to retract it all, then exhaled and let the silence carry the verdict. He pushes me, he pushes all of us, he said, eyes steady now, as if confessing to a priest made of cameras. The flashlights burst like sparks from an over-revved clutch, freezing the moment when vulnerability replaced pride. Every story in MotoGP begins with speed but survives on truth, and in that instant, Bagnaia's truth was unmistakable. He came back not like a man healed, but like a storm that had remembered its name. Marc Márquez, once written off as a relic of glory, began the 2025 season with a hunger sharpened by years of silence. Each race was a sermon on control, each corner a declaration of faith in physics rewritten. Phillip Island, Mugello, Sachsenring, the circuits became the chapters of his resurrection. The data analysts at Ducati whispered about impossible lean angles, 66 degrees recorded at Spielberg, a number that defied the algorithms designed to define him. Engineers studied the traces in disbelief. Pecco Bagnaia simply watched. Marc is on another level right now, he murmured, voice caught between awe and exhaustion. The things he does on the bike, especially in the left corners, nobody else can do. I've seen the data. It's almost magical. The magic wasn't myth. It was mathematics disguised as instinct, a synthesis of pain and precision few could endure. Bagnaia lingered at the monitor long after the mechanics had left, the telemetry line of Marquez glowing like a lifeline in a wound. How do you chase someone who bends reality itself? He thought, the question echoing against the concrete walls of the garage. Marc's breaking points were later, his throttle openings smoother, his transitions a dance between courage and calculation. Even the sensors told a story of reincarnation. Arm torque distribution nearly symmetrical again after years of imbalance, proof that flesh had finally forgiven steel. Reporters called it a comeback. Those inside Ducati called it inevitability. He moved through corners like Mercury, finding the cracks of a broken world. Bagnaia knew what that meant. Perfection wasn't about control. It was about surrender to chaos until chaos bowed. The air in every pit he entered seemed charged, an electrical hum that made others straighten their backs unconsciously. And in that current, Pecco felt both admiration and dread intertwine, a duet of respect and self-doubt impossible to silence. Marquez didn't just win races, he reshaped the geometry of belief. The Ducati GP25 was supposed to be an evolution, not a betrayal, yet for Francesco Bagnaia it behaved like a living thing that had turned against him. Each time he entered the corner, the front tire whispered deceit, sliding half a heartbeat earlier than the simulation predicted. The bike has problems, we all know it, he confessed after another long, silent debrief. But Marc hides them. That's the difference between a great rider and a legend. Engineers traced his frustration to an elusive oscillation in the rear-wheel inertia, 0.03 seconds slower in load transfer compared to Marquez's telemetry. On paper, it was nothing. On asphalt, it was eternity. The mechanics adjusted springs, forks, geometry, but the soul of the machine remained unfaithful. Bagnaia's riding, once symphonic, now sounded like a song slightly out of tune. In private, he stared at the data screens, at the red line of his own laps tangled beneath the gold line of Marc's perfection, wondering where feeling had gone. What if I've forgotten how to listen to her? He thought, meaning the motorcycle, not himself. Ducati's engineers said the GP25 needed aggression to work. Bagnaia gave it poetry instead. Marquez, by contrast, spoke to it in violence, and the bike responded like metal recognizing its maker. The metaphor wasn't lost on anyone. One rider tamed a storm, the other tried to negotiate with it. Phillip Island, Misano, Red Bull Ring. The story repeated like an echo through steel. Reporters asked if it was setup, luck, or destiny, and Pecco answered with the calm of someone already dissecting his own failure. He refused to hide behind technical bulletins or convenient alibis. I can't complain when my teammate wins with the same machine, he said, voice steady, eyes elsewhere. His honesty struck harder than any crash. Inside the paddock, that phrase became both shield and confession, proof that greatness sometimes wears the face of defeat. The GP25 didn't just challenge his skill, it forced him to confront the limits of belief itself. Every champion meets a moment when the machine stops obeying, and in its silence, he hears the echo of who he truly is. The Japanese air smelled of rain and redemption when Francesco Bagnaia rolled out of the garage at Motegi. The paddock lights trembled on wet asphalt like nervous stars waiting for a cue. His season had been a descent without bottom, yet that morning something invisible aligned. Japan was a turning point, he said later, the words tasting of disbelief and relief. I arrived broken, mentally, emotionally. But from the first lap, I felt alive again. The Ducati beneath him felt different. Less like a beast, more like a heartbeat returned. The engineers had shortened the wheelbase by 2 millimeters, a microscopic gamble that changed how the GP25 loaded the front tire through turn 11. On the timing screens, that adjustment was a whisper. On the track, it was a roar. Maybe the motorcycle finally forgave me, he thought as he tipped into the first left of the sprint, throttle wide, fear muted. The crowd saw a man reborn, but inside the helmet, he was quietly terrified of losing that fragile harmony. Each lap, he balanced between faith and collapse, a tightrope drawn in tire rubber. The rain came and went like memory, each drop erasing a failure from earlier in the year. By Saturday evening, he had beaten Marquez by almost 2 seconds, a stopwatch blinking disbelief. Sunday became a symphony of control. Clean starts, surgical braking, tire were managed to the decimal. Reporters later said he rode as if guided by metronome and prayer in equal parts. I didn't want to take the spotlight from Marc. He earned that title. He reminded them, eyes wet from exhaustion, not weather. I just needed to remember what it feels like to win again. In the garage, applause replaced analysis, data engineers clapping with grease-stained hands. Bagnaia smiled only when the last monitor dimmed, the adrenaline draining into quiet disbelief. In the Ducati garage, the air smelled of rubber, electricity, and restraint, a fragile peace negotiated between two predators who understood one another too well. The tension that once clung to every silence had softened into something slower, almost human. Pecco Bagnaia and Marc Márquez stood separated by 5 meters of concrete and a lifetime of victories, their mechanics moving around them like careful diplomats. "I don't want a war in the garage," Pecco said one afternoon, voice low enough to hide from the cameras. "We're not Rossi and Lorenzo. We're not Senna and Prost. We fight on track, not outside it." The phrase circulated through the paddock like a new rule of survival. "He's my rival, not my enemy," he reminded himself whenever the red light blinked and the helmets went on. Respect had become their form of discipline, a code stronger than sponsorship contracts. The telemetry screens showed 2 lives unfolding in parallel. Marquez's throttle trace slightly smoother at corner exit, Bagnaia's braking pressure higher by 2 bars. That difference, 2 bars of pressure, was all that separated pride from humiliation. Engineers joked that the garage floor could measure tension inside. And yet, there was laughter now, nervous but real, leaking through the hum of cooling fans. They learned to share information without surrendering identity, to trade feedback without giving away secrets. The metaphor that best described them wasn't war, but weather, 2 storms colliding yet somehow creating calm in the eye they shared. Outside, journalists hunted conflict, but inside, the mood was scientific, surgical, occasionally tender. Marquez offered advice on tire temperature management at 95 degrees. Pecco listened, nodded, stored it for later like a thief of wisdom. When the engines fired, words dissolved into the smell of fuel, replaced by the truth that only the stopwatch could pronounce. Rivalry had turned into reflection, each man sharpening the other's edge without drawing blood. When Marc Márquez lifted the championship trophy under the floodlights of Motegi, the crowd roared for resurrection, but in the opposite corner of the paddock, Francesco Bagnaia sat motionless, watching the reflection of that silver curve in the visor of his helmet. The applause sounded distant, almost polite, like rain hitting a closed window. "This year, it's been brutal," he would admit later, voice hoarse from restraint. "I felt lost at times, slower than I was in 2024. I've tried everything, and nothing seemed to work." You start wondering if you've thrown the season away. Those words, stripped of bravado, became the quiet headline of his year. While Marquez celebrated, Pecco studied the numbers. Tire degradation at 0.21% per lap higher than expected, fuel map inconsistencies stealing 0.2 on acceleration. Statistics had replaced faith, and yet they gave him no comfort. How do you fix a feeling when it isn't mechanical? He wondered, staring at the graphs like a priest reading silence. Around him, mechanics clapped for Marc, then turned back to their work, embarrassed by victory's uneven light. Ducati's engineers called it the human delta, that unmeasurable gap between talent and timing. Pecco's humility, once mistaken for weakness, became his only weapon against despair. He moved through interviews like a man translating pain into patience, refusing to blame, refusing to break. In private, he confessed to a friend that the hardest part wasn't losing. It was losing belief for a moment. Reporters noted the irony, the champion defeated by his own perfectionism. The paddock smelled of champagne and burned clutch. A perfume of triumph and exhaustion mingled. The metaphor that came to mind was musical rather than violent. Marquez played a symphony in major, Bagnaia answered in minor, both part of the same composition called Ducati. When the cameras finally left, Pecco walked the empty pit lane, the asphalt still warm beneath his boots, listening to the faint ticking of cooling engines like fading applause. He understood that glory and humility were not opposites but reflections on the same visor. In a team built for one hero, Ducati discovered the danger of housing 2 constellations in a single sky. The final sunset of the 2025 season bled across the paddock like molten copper, a slow burn that mirrored Francesco Bagnaia's rekindled resolve. The world saw a smile, but beneath the helmet lingered the tremor of unfinished business. His eyes followed Marquez in park firm, reading not victory, but invitation. "At the end of the day, Marc makes me better," he told reporters later, words calm as oil spreading across still water. "That's what I meant when I said it's difficult without him." I need him there, pushing me, forcing me to dig deeper. That's what makes this sport beautiful. Two champions driving each other higher. Around them, cameras clicked like a chorus of mechanical heartbeats. The handshake between them wasn't ceremony. It was covenant. I'm not chasing his shadow anymore, Pecco thought. I'm chasing the part of me that believes I can match him. Ducati's data confirmed something quietly miraculous. His corner entry stability, once erratic, had improved by 0.15 seconds per sector since Motegi, a small statistic carrying the weight of rebirth. Engineers called it progress. Bagnaia called it peace. The off-season test would begin soon. New parts, new engines, new ghosts to tame. Marquez's laughter echoed through the pit lane like thunder that promised rain, not destruction. The metaphor fit perfectly. Two volcanoes resting, but never extinct, their heat reshaping the same island. In brief interviews, Pecco spoke with the serenity of someone who had stopped fearing comparison. He talked about balance, about finding rhythm again, about respect as a form of combustion. The journalists sensed that his humility no longer had pain, but preparation. The factory team felt it too. The quiet between them no longer carried tension but charge, as if the air itself awaited ignition. Testing and sepping would tell the truth, but for now, the story belonged to possibility. And when the lights of the circuit dimmed, Bagnaia lingered a moment longer beside his bike, fingertips resting on the tank like a vow renewed.